All right. Welcome, everybody. This is this week's Web 3 by 3. We are in season 2, episode 5. This is your weekly insight into the business side of Web 3. And this week's episode, are regulators pouring cold water on crypto? As usual, actually, quick recap on that one. The SEC is right now suing digital asset platform Kraken. PayPal has stopped work on their stablecoin issuance, and a string of similar news stories are weighing on the crypto markets. Obviously, this has implications for Web3 and the business angles. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host here, Michelle Peterson-Clark, the content marketing queen.
Hey, everyone.
And Mike Neubauer, your ops guy.
How's it going?
Michelle will be bringing the marketing chops. Mike will bring the tech operations, and I will be sales strategy. I'm going to jump us right into story number one. Story number one is the SEC intensifies crypto enforcement with exchange settlement. This comes to us through the Wall Street Journal. And briefly, digital asset platform Kraken has agreed to discontinue its crypto staking program in the U.S. They're going to be paying a $30 million fine to the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, for selling unregistered securities. And for those who don't know, staking allows investors to earn a yield by temporarily handing their crypto over to the platform. So we will start with Mike on this one. Mike, what do you think right now about the SEC's enforcement action?
I think that they recognize that this is nothing more than an interest that crypto is earning. And they decided that they wanted to stick their hand in the cookie jar. No different from anything else. You can classify it as a security. You can classify it as a currency. The jury's still out on it. And I don't think they have their own definition. They just want money. Now, there's a lot of issues with staking that I believe still need to be regulated. And we've talked about that, pretty extensively on this show. I don't know ultimately where this ends up. Again, I think that a set of regulations are in line for exchanges versus actual marketplaces versus actual platforms. And once we start delineating those and defining those specifically, we can start properly regulating them.
Interesting. So, Michelle, what's your thought on this SEC finally getting off their duffer?
Yeah, look, I agree with Mike. I think that they've gone, hey, hang on, for the last year or 2 or 3 years, there's been lots of money changing hands and people seemingly have been making lots of money, and we want a piece of the pie. And I would suspect that they feel a bit sort of shown up, if you like, by the FTX saga, so that they were asleep at the wheel, let's say, and people have sort of been saying, well, how come people who lost their money, people who aren't necessarily Web3 people, but any of those sort of, we would say mums and dads, except there's probably not a lot of mums and dads in crypto at the moment, but there's people who had life savings in an exchange like FTX. And so they want to know what happened, like were the SEC asleep at the wheel, or, should federal regulation have been brought in sooner so that I didn't lose my money? And I think that they, it's also one of these things, I think, that they don't quite know where to go with it. So they're going to go, oh, let's pick that spot there and let's start there and see what happens. I think where we are now and where we go in the future, or when we end up, is going to be quite different.
So there's a story off the back of CoinDesk here. Crypto upswing stalls amid fresh regulatory concerns. In light of this action by the SEC, there's now crypto uncertainty with possibility of regulations forthcoming. There's the crypto world is talking about right now, Bitcoin and Ethereum have decoupled from traditional assets. They seem to be holding value better. Let's put it that way. So there's a bunch of news stories which I won't go into, but there's a lot of regulatory action at the New York state level and at the federal level in the United States. So what's happening is, in my opinion, the regulators are trying to get a handle on this in the back of FTX. I think I agree with you 100%, Michelle. The story that caught my eye was PayPal. PayPal is pausing their stablecoin work amid regulatory scrutiny. This is Bloomberg. So PayPal had partnered with Paxos, which was building out a stablecoin that PayPal was going to be issuing, but now that's all on hold. Paxos is being investigated by the New York State Attorney General's office, the financial regulators there. obviously are going to be in league with the SEC's approach. My guess is unregistered securities, et cetera. We'll find out. The point is, I think this is the pushback from TradFi, right? This is the traditional banking system trying to get a handle. We've always talked on this show that the typical Wall Street players will eventually want their piece of the pie. I think this is regulation is the way in for them. What do you guys think?
Well, I wanted to make one comment with respect to the way the feds operate in these types of conditions, and I'm going to move it away from the financial field into the pharmaceutical field. However you want to look at it, however you want to play it, there's hundreds of billions of dollars at stakes and tens of millions of dollars worth of fines. So when you actually do the cost benefit ratio, sometimes pharmaceutical companies are much more happy to pay off a fine than they are to do a recall that costs them that type of primary financial, benefit. So $30 million to Kraken is definitely nothing compared to what they accumulated. And I think we might still see these things. And unless the government still has their hand in that cookie jar, maybe the push won't necessarily be as far and as fast for the regulatory side of things. Again, it's all about money. It all boils down to where that money goes and how fast and how much that money can be executed. One of the things that I think we talked about last week, and I guess a pre-show to the Super Bowl, was there wasn't a push for crypto as part of the television ads. Saw ironically a lot of movie ads, which I'm not sure how that generated all that money with attendance at theaters pretty down here, but the one thing that did strike me was there is still a Web3 push, and I know we'll get into that, but I say that just to kind of segue back to what we're discussing currently. The FTX scenario, albeit a black eye on the industry, is not a definition of the industry, right? And I know we've said that several times on this show, and I think that it's worth reiterating, because as some of these stories start coming out, the ebbs and flows of where the market goes are going to be dependent on some of the handling of these types of things. Kraken is not shutting down.
I think it is a black eye on the industry, and it's the traditional finance industry, because FTX was a centralized entity. Nobody argues that. So this, in my mind, is, it's a very much a black eye. It's no different from Madoff or Lehman Brothers.
I agree with you. And again, the way that there's different variations of the way that the government handled the situation, as long as, again, you take that scenario versus what Coinbase dealt with a couple months back versus what Kraken just dealt with recently, there's going to be those fines in place. They're going to be implemented. There's going to be multiple ways to handle it. Somebody's going to get, under the butcher's knife, the FTXs, for all the right reasons, by the way. I'm not defending them. And then there's going to be others that just have to, kind of shift their model to be more, I guess, in line with cutting that piece of the pie in the right direction.
This isn't part of this conversation, and I don't want to go into it, but for those who are following, the U.S. Federal Reserve has been anti-crypto clearing firms, anti-stablecoin issuance. They're starting to move opinion pieces they've been putting out. And you can Google this, is public record, not conspiracy. And then coincidentally, the SEC is now taking this. I guess they've been taking these actions all along, right? We've talked about regulation by enforcement rather than policy. But I do feel that you've now got companies like Circle and BlackRock that are getting a leg in on the crypto world. You're starting to see TradFi, they're clamoring for rules. FTX is the perfect excuse, but I don't think the government wants this crypto end around on the banking system. And I think this is how they're going to get back at it. Now, let's see how it develops. But either way, this impacts Web3 clearly, because on the good side, a set of rules would be great, right? We all have been saying this. Big companies will move into Web3 and have marketing activations that involve NFTs when there's rules around this stuff. But right now,
fast forward to Super Bowl, we saw it, right?
Let's talk about it.
And if we think about it too, the reason why a lot of these bigger companies want regulation is, let's face it, so they can legitimately get involved and have a piece of the pie. Because it isn't regulated right now, and because it, has the appearance of being sometimes a bit sketchy, or, when there's large rug pulls in projects and stuff like that, it kind of puts a bad light on it. And so, the larger firms who are sort of having, buying up little bits of Bitcoin and stuff like that. That's all they're doing at the moment. But, let's be under no delusion that they want to be all in if they can make money out of it.
So to that point, as you guys know, Doritos had an activation during the Super Bowl, Mike, right? They were in Decentraland. And this wasn't part of our discussion, but for those who follow the news here, Reddit had, what was it? Michelle, you posted this. They'd given away over 1 million NFTs on Polygon related to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they're moving anyway into the Web3 is not like a fantasy. These companies know there's money there.
No. Yeah.
And Mike,
absolutely.
you speak to this too.
And the other thing too, and Mike can speak to this probably as well. There are a lot of crypto projects who have their own tokens, who have staking programs where people can earn extra tokens or they earn a return based on how many people are in the pool and what the project, how much money the project have put in, et cetera, et cetera. So, like the implications for this are quite wide varying across a large number of Web3 projects, not just for outsiders who want to come into the space.
Well,
Mike.
an NFT is a token, right? So you can still stake that without it being a fungible token. And there are reward metrics that are associated with staking fungible and non-fungible tokens. And again, we talk about the business application of this, and this is what I'm excited to see, some of those interactions and those advancements in something as big as the Super Bowl. And, brands like Frito-Lay and Pepsi, which is Doritos, they're starting to understand that this is a tool, right? This is nothing more than a tool that can help them accomplish something else in their marketing strategies, something else in their collaboration strategies. I mean, nobody's going to go into the metaverse and eat Doritos, but there's a system where brand recognition and subliminal messaging is definitely in place. I mean, Wendy's kind of proved that, where they actually hired people to work at a Wendy's in the metaverse. But, there was another ad in the Super Bowl relative to, hey, download this and, scan here and you can download this free digital collectible. And, we can put all these fancy titles and names on it and everything. But I think, again, the more that people start seeing this information, the more people are going to understand that there are multiple use cases for it, which might put the things like FTX and those black guys a little bit further in the rearview mirror. We need good stories like this to come about. We need good things like this from major brands who are willing to spend the money and market it and help onboard people into the space in order to understand that there is a great use case for this technology.
So just to clarify this, the Doritos activation was in Decentraland. They had the Doritos Triangle Studios. They issued $25,000 worth of prizes that you could win playing mini games, so puzzles and things, which is not great, but it's interesting.
It's a gamification, right?
Yeah.
Pepsi has games under their caps, right? Frito-Lay's has games with Messi on a bag, and you open the bag and there's a little playing card of Messi in there. These are no different from any other marketing strategies that have existed since cereal was put into a box with a toy, right?
I'm thinking of Cracker Jacks.
There you go, even better. So again, it's repurposing the same psychological game mechanic over and over and over again using this new unique technology.
So, Mike, real fast, since we're on the football topic, update us on Unfan.
Well, I mean, the season is obviously over. Kudos
but your work isn't.
I don't know what you said before, Mike, about.
Michelle chopped out.
Am I getting a delay?
No, I think, Michelle, your internet's choppy a little bit. While we're getting her back, there's another.
No, it's me probably.
That's okay. We can hear you now.
My dodgy internet. Is it back now?
Yes.
We're still on a delay.
I was just gonna say before to Mike, I said, I don't know about eating Doritos in Decentraland, but I'd definitely go an ice cream.
The other major topic that I wanted to touch today was this DeFi versus Web3 thing. This was an article I came across I thought was fascinating. That basically a lot of people, as we've discussed, don't understand the differences between the metaverse and Web3 and decentralized finance. It's one big lump in their mind. And so really quickly, DeFi and Web3 are two separate but related innovations. And this is an article I read on Cointelegraph. Both DeFi and Web3 envision decentralization and security. Web3 seeks user control over data, and DeFi seeks a financial system without the banks as the intermediaries. That little thing there, like DeFi is seeking transparency, Web3 is seeking control of privacy. They're similar, and they're both using blockchain tech, but they have different philosophical push, if you will. What are your thoughts on this? We'll start with you, Michelle.
Oh, I don't know. I think we should start with Mike first. One of the things that I did think was interesting about it was that I'm noticing more and more lately that because we're in this crypto winter, I think that there are a larger number of players moving towards education, and instead of making TikToks or YouTube shorts on, here's this NFT project, or here's my Wendy store in Decentraland. They're actually saying, hey, this is what it is, this is what it isn't, this is it compared to Web3 compared to something else, etc., etc. And there's been an increase of that stuff. I've noticed maybe just in perhaps this year, the last 4 to 6 weeks, whereas last year it wasn't as much like that. And I think that we're going to see more and more of that, because I know that there's a lot of people who've been in Web3 for a long time and have big audiences and are active in the space, know that there needs to be more education in order for more people to adopt the space and move into it. And until we do that, then it's never going to be or realize its potential.
Mike, what are your thoughts?
So my initial thought when I read the article was that it's poorly written and poorly describes both of those respective platforms, because it gives it in a very black and white context when there's multiple parallel paths and overlays that both DeFi and Web3 rely on each other for in certain capacities. Now, I think Web3 in particular has evolved to, I guess, survive without the DeFi element, right? We're seeing credit card companies come into the play. We're seeing different applications as part of utilizing Web2 integration into Web3 constructs. We're seeing off-chain tokens, reward systems. We saw that on Entra. We're seeing that on Twitter. We're seeing that on a bunch of different places. But, I think that the more people understand that the actual technology component does have a level of ownership that Web2 does not, the understanding of Web3 is going to far surpass DeFi. I don't think people want to understand how banking works. I don't think they want to understand how finance works. I don't think they want to sit here and do the math in their head on what ETH is currently versus what it was yesterday, how that relates to the yen or the US dollar or whatever. Like, I think this makes it a little too complex, and it loses the Doritos in the metaverse, right? It loses that concept. If we can eliminate these barriers to entry, the Web3 construct becomes that app on your phone that makes you waffles that we reference here quite often.
Interesting.
I'm 55 years old, and I think I've had a bank account since I was about, 5 or 6, maybe, the school banking. And I still don't understand how the banking regulation system works properly. So I don't think that people are going to be rushing to understand how banking and DeFi go together very easily. I think Mike's right about that.
I really want to expand on that point, Michelle, because that's a great example of how the evolution of this is going to work and how we've seen it work thus far. When you open that bank account, would you say you're 22 years old? So 15 years ago or so. When you open that bank account, they gave you a book. Right. And that book had an account number on it. And you used to have to go to the bank and they would stamp whatever transaction you had. And that was your ledger, right? That was your record keeping piece. Over time, that evolved to maybe have a card, but you still needed the book because you still had to prove it was you in some way, shape, or form. And, and ultimately it led to a fingerprint and, maybe a card that you just receive in the mail. It ends up in your wallet, but it's stored on every platform you hold. This is the easing of the onboarding process that we keep referring to in this Web3 world, right? So we're at the stage where that MetaMask wallet and that seed phrase and all of these various elements on how you're supposed to move these tokens around in an effort to free them up to purchase these digital assets. We're simplifying that concept so that people can kind of move back towards something that they're comfortable with, something that they're used to. And it's only going to encourage some of these major players that we referenced earlier to start pushing more of the marketing dollars and awareness in that direction, because now it's easier for people to jump in on it.
So, Mike, you're drawing an interesting distinction. I agree with you that they're rolling back the decentralization aspect of DeFi, which would make it Fi. So, is it possible to have centralized DeFi and Web3?
I mean, the Web3 world again was constructed in a construct where decentralization was the fundamental element, right? It was the variable that drove to the technology to exist. But I think we said this many moons ago, many episodes ago. That was not going to be sustainable once larger players started to get their hands on it, right? Just like any marketing strategy, just like any Facebook ad or any paid ad, like you want the data, you want as much information as you can and gather from people. The only thing that has survived to this point is the consumer's ability to control the marketplace. And I think that's an element of Web3 that is easy to understand, that companies might give a little bit of leash on, allow the communities to grow and understand the technology a little bit more, still while maintaining some sort of a FI element to the onboarding process.
But if you look at what AI and ChatGPT and all these new technologies are doing, they have democratized. Google is under threat, as we talked about last week or the week before. It's the same thing it's a similar scenario, right? To the financial district systems that are in place right now, banking. I almost feel like you can't hold back the wave, right? While people want protection and the 1-800 number to call when someone cracks their credit card, they also don't want to have this centralization aspect. And I don't mean people in general know that they're being disenfranchised to some degree, are kind of okay with it. But I think for Web3 to really grow, there has to be a decentralization aspect. Like you said, that's why the tech was invented.
I agree with you. And, I'm going to quote a really good friend of mine. I love you, but nobody gives a shit about the technology.
That sounds
right?
awfully familiar.
I mean, you and I trade hats and seats pretty much on a weekly basis now. You throw things at me, I throw it back at you, man. But
Amen.
and that's a good thing, because it shows that there's fluidity in the way that the market is moving, right? And the way that people are adopting to the technology. Right. I think in the long run, again, as long as we have that app that makes waffles, as long as there's a Doritos house that people can earn these prizes in, they're going to engage with the technology in some way, shape, or form. Doritos doesn't care. They're getting their marketing play out of it. They're dipping their toes into the technology. It's cool. It's awesome. But you know what? The difference, I think, is really where the consumers control the marketplace on those digital assets. And once that element is truly understood by the consumer, this is going to expand, because people are going to realize, hey, why don't I create this? Instead of creating an e-commerce store where I'm selling art to, on a canvas, why can't I just do this as an NFT? And, there's no code solutions that are cropping up all over the place that makes that the Wix version or the Shopify version in, helping to create those digital assets and actually cut out the middleman with the fees and with some sort of a DeFi element. Yeah, there's gas fees, there's transaction fees, but there's still very much Web3 elements that people can truly understand where the technology and the onboarding process is today.
I feel like there's an aspect here where when people initially encountered social platforms, they just consumed. And when it became clear that if you were a producer on the platforms, and I'm talking 06, 08, you could become an influencer and then make a living from it. All of a sudden, everyone's on the platforms now producing. I feel like we're at that early phase with Web3. NFTs are kind of a cool thing. I might go buy something from Reddit because I'm an NFL fan. But initially, we're all just consuming. I think this leads to what you're saying, Mike. Eventually, people can issue their own thing.
Well, I'm going to comment briefly on the chat GPT and the AI element, and then I'm going to throw it to Michelle as the content marketing queen, because it is a marketing comment. And this was from a business class that I took at university where, they basically said, like the advertising world, it will follow the honeypot. And wherever that honeypot is where the money will follow, because, just like us as consumers, the bees that are going to follow that honeypot is currently in the AI realm, right? But it still has its toes in Web3. It still has its toes very much in Web2. I don't see too many people lining up to buy Encyclopedia Britannicas, but, like the bottom line is that as this marketing evolution continues to grow, and as these like various technologies to continue to expand, there's not necessarily a threat, more of an integration into the ways that these tools are going to be applied in people's lives. You are the one that is very consistent about Google being under threat. Maybe we read an article last week where they tried to implement something, it failed, and their stock plummeted, whatever. Like, bottom line is, there's still very much a lot of people that will leverage Google. There's still very much a lot of businesses that will not trust in this until it is becoming the next Google. Like, they are not under immediate threat. And I think that if people can leverage the merge of Web 2 integration into Web 3 and not just go all in on Web 3, we're going to see an ease in transition, not in just the onboarding phase, but the investment phase from a business, and the understanding and the application from a business as well.
Right. We're having some technical issues with Michelle right now, Mike, but I'm going to take out my 6-foot broadsword and come back at you right now. Google, in my opinion, is not under immediate threat. I agree with you, of course. That is a well-capitalized firm. But the reality is their business model is now in question. And what I mean by that is when there's only one search result comes back off the search engine, I don't have the ability to sell advertising to a billion companies who want to move up my page rankings. Google in an AI world that model doesn't work.
It does work. It works in a different way. And that way might not clearly be defined yet, but they will figure out ways to integrate certain elements of AI into their existing channels, whether it's Blur or whatever we discussed it was last time that failed miserably because it said that, the North Star was south or something. I don't know whatever the search term was.
Right.
But the bottom line is that all of these things are an evolution to where we are, and it's happening so fast. I mean, think about how long it takes a multi-million, billion, trillion-dollar entity to pivot one way or another. Now you're talking about a technology that has started at the blink of an eye and has advanced so much in such a short. When did we start talking about Chat GPT?
Well,
2 months ago? 3 months ago?
Right.
Okay. Where is it now versus where it was then? Where is it in the user identification? Where is it in the actual production of content? Like, it's night and day. I mean, what you saw back then versus where it is. I mean, this is an evolution of technology of that magnitude like we've never seen before, including Google. Okay. Google will transition, and they will not necessarily devour, but they will integrate. And I think that's where the Web 2 integration will work, because 79-year-old grandma is not going to sit there and rely on Chat GPT to figure out a recipe to make brownies. She knows how to do Google.
But with Chat GPT's abilities, an army of people are already building tools that grandma will use that's powered by Chat GPT, and they won't even know it.
Correct.
And by the way, a quick math on this, Google's revenue is 57% coming from search ads. 57% is a pretty high number. It's not OpenAI and their little widget against Google. Microsoft is using the front man of ChatGPT to come at Google.
And Microsoft, did you hear about Alt VR? Alt Space VR? Okay, so this was a Microsoft-based Web3 interaction in the metaverse, we'll call it. It was a great platform. I've built lands in there with the Battle Bunnies. It worked great until it didn't work great because those resources had to be put somewhere else, i.e. this AI technology. Microsoft and their advancement in technology like this and their investments, they're not selling me on their sustainable business model.
Right. Right. I don't, it can go either way. My point is that OpenAI is well capitalized and there's some smart people that want it to win. Now Google, I agree. This is an interesting conundrum. They have a problem on their hands, I believe. They're not going to go away, but they have to change. They have to. We already know, and if you're not aware, there are in development right now search SEO AI driven companies. So AI SEO means I can take your search terms for, what your company does, and I can crank out 200 articles a day using those. And that's what's happening. You would hire a search firm like that to just generate blogs out the wazoo, which ultimately, if you follow that out, makes SEO worthless and Google can't make money off it.
Great. You know what? It's a taste of your own medicine, man. I mean, you've manipulated your algorithm to your benefit. Now people are using your algorithm against you. And
Right.
they're doing it in a way that this little widget is competing with this Goliath. But I hate using these two entities against each other because frankly, I just don't like the way that they've constructed themselves and really kind of put their claws everywhere. But take a company like Amazon. I mean, Amazon, where it started out to where it has all of its multiple streams of revenue at this point is night and day. I mean, you're talking about, a company that if all transportation ended tomorrow can still survive just based on their web services alone.
But the difference between Amazon when it was coming up and Google right now facing ChatGPT/Microsoft is it was founder driven. Jeff Bezos, by anyone's description, whether you like him or not, is a genius business mind. And
He's an
so
entrepreneur. Yeah.
Google is not run by Sergey anymore. There's a bunch of managers who are really smart people making decisions.
Amazon too.
Amazon, right? But Amazon's not the one in the limelight right now. I don't know. I'm not saying Google's going to fail, but I definitely think this is a bigger threat than you do to Google's business model.
Okay, so let's talk about the advertising because that seems to be your sticking point, right? That's where you think that they're going to fail, and that's where you think they're going to plummet.
It's not that I think they make 57% of their money as a company, Alphabet, from that.
Great. Are there still phone books? Are there still ads in phone books? Are there still billboards? I mean, like these things still exist, right? And there's still a primary market for them. Now, I'm not saying that it's going to be the Goliath that it is, and it may not be 57% of their revenue model, but maybe it doesn't need to be. If they can transition 30 of that 57% into some sort of an AI integration, Google will be just fine, man. Look, they are still in a position where they are going to follow that honey jar. Right? They're going to see where those bees go and they're going to start investing into those tools, whether it's perfected out of the gate. It's not a race to be first anymore. It's a race to be the most reliant and the best. Yeah. And I think that once people start understanding that this including Web3 and AI technology is here to stay, people will start funneling and finding the tools that fit them best. An iPhone and an Android is a perfect example.
So bringing this back full circle, and welcome back, Michelle. I'm hoping you can hear us.
I can. Sorry. Apologies, everyone.
There's a new combination I'm seeing on social media that you guys may have noticed also. This combination of Web3, AI, which we're talking about now, and the creator economy. There's a, I don't know what the word is, like a collusion or a overlap. People are lumping those three things together all of a sudden because Web3 quickly became AI, but now folks are trying to connect it back into the creator economy. And it's because of the tools capabilities that people can build stuff. So I'm keeping one eye just, strategically on this trifold Web3 AI creator economy thing. That seems to be the new focal point. What are you guys' thoughts on that? And this, I know we didn't prepare for this, but I'm just curious.
Michelle, you got to take this one.
Part of the problem, I think, is all of the things I've seen recently is about how this is your next get rich quick scheme. How you can create, 800 million blog posts a week and sell them for $100 each, and suddenly you're in the money. Really interesting piece I read the other day where a physicist asked ChatGPT to write an article for them about a journalist asked ChatGPT to write an article for them about an area of physics, and then had a physicist, like someone who is actually qualified in the field, look at the article grammatically and, in terms of English and how well it read, perfectly fine. Accuracy of information, it got about a 2 out of 100. So the person who was not the astrophysicist can't just suddenly start writing articles about or asking ChatGTP for articles about things that you are not even an expert in, but you have some knowledge in. So, you know, like while it may produce something that reads well and sounds good, it doesn't replace actually knowing your topic and knowing your subject. So once we start to get some really subpar content out there on particular topics that will be shot down by the experts in those areas pretty quickly, then, you know, it's not going to be the panacea that everyone thinks that, you know, suddenly they can all become creators because ChatGTP is going to, you know, make you workload 10% of what it used to be.
So to your point, Michelle, when I'm helping customers with sales funnels, and I'm sure you do the same thing in the content marketing world, they oftentimes you have to know the right question to ask. Like, what should the content even be about? And if you're not even in the space, you can
How
Google
would you
it,
know what to
right?
ask?
But you wouldn't. There's terminology and jargon, lingo specific to every industry, and there's questions that you would ask if you're on the inside of that. I can tell you from finance, like no stocks ever make it to the floor of the stock exchange. I've mentioned that to you before. People don't know that. Like, but if you're in the space, you know that. You know what a wholesaler is in the stock market world. And so my point is, if you don't know the innards of that space, you can't possibly be effective in writing content around it. You can't. But that means
No.
specialization of content marketing.
Well, okay. So the content creation element of this, it was fearful that that might eliminate those types of positions, those types of opportunities, right? Just like the AI art was going to take away from artists. And, you know, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference if this AI generated art came from a computer or if it actually came from somebody's brilliant mind who then was able to translate that into a hand or a stroke and a pen or a paintbrush. Everything you said, Michelle, is what I was fearful when we first absolutely started talking about this topic was, when do we get to a point where this becomes that gospel truth, right? And we're already seeing, you know, very, very specific examples of how incorrect this information is. And one of the beauty parts, you know, segueing it back to Google or just any other random search engine, is the availability of all sides of the story, right? All aspects of it. You know, I can find an article that proves to you the sky is purple. And that's just because it's a multitude of endless information that's out there if I dig deep enough. With this tool, I think, you know, first of all, it's definitely helpful for content creators, right? It can help explain things in a way if you have writer's block or if you're trying to formulate an idea. But I've seen firsthand in, for example, the food fight, you know, Discord server, I've seen, you know, guys like Ashman Tunes do a rap battle with Chat GPT and it went viral, right? Like, this is content creation from a very creative, brilliant individual who's using the technology in a way to showcase what the technology is capable of doing in alignment with his creativity. Like, that is content creation. Right. So you're using the tool in that capacity. It may not be the best. It may not be gospel truth. It may not even make sense, but it's entertaining. And for some sort of a content creator, that's really one of the primary purposes of developing your community.
So 2 points on that, Mike. Number one, as you like to say, it becomes the gospel truth when it's used in that capacity. It's a problem. In the entertainment, as you mentioned, I'm okay with. But in the entertainment sphere, if you haven't seen this, there's a bunch of AI generated Eminem raps. Have you seen this on YouTube?
No.
You can basically,
Yes.
right.
Yeah.
It's hilarious. It's just Eminem preaching the gospel and whatever, like in Eminem's voice over Eminem's music in Eminem's style of rapping about ridiculous things. And my point is, this is going to create all kinds of problems. And I don't just mean copyright. I mean, people.
Well,
Well,
get people into
Eminem
trouble,
doesn't
man.
get money for that, does he? Yeah.
Well,
No.
I mean, they can make him say anything. Like, he can get canceled tomorrow for something he didn't even do.
So,
right? Like, this is the deep fake all over again.
Have you seen Joe Rogan and Huberman discussing, I think it's erectile dysfunction drugs? It's not a real conversation, but it is actually, and it's video. Joe Rogan discussing with Dr. Huberman. There's another one with Joe Rogan interviewing Steve Jobs on the Joe Rogan show, which obviously Jobs wasn't around for this. And I don't mean audio,
Yeah.
video.
Yeah. And
It's
look,
amazing.
that I mean, look at the evolution of AI in these short 2 months, right? We saw the visualization in the image, right? The hieroglyphics back in the communication days. Now it's into written form. What's next? It's video, right?
Right.
And that video is really where it's going to get a little nutty, because people are going to be able to create anything that they imagine, and nobody, like, they're you want to talk about regulatory or timestamps or something, that watermarks that has to be put into some of these to make sure that they're legit, or like, you can literally ruin people's lives. You can set people up for anything in these constructs. And, again, whatever evidence we classify as gospel truth today could be manipulated using these technologies. It's very scary where this can go. Now, again, there's good and bad on all of these technology platforms. I mean, we just have to be aware of them and keep them conscious, because there's a security and a risk element when it comes to these types of things. Somebody told me once, in building Web3 smart contracts and dealing with NFT projects, the higher your excitement, like the higher the level of the FOMO, the fear of missing out, and the hype and all that stuff, the higher the level of your risk. And if you kind of understand that balance in all of these different technologies, you should be able to protect yourself accordingly, like that.
You know what this reminds me of? For those who are familiar with the in the rock and roll world, bands have printed T-shirts when they go on tours, or even better yet, like the old Velcro wallets when we were growing up. There were always these knockoffs, these crappy products from the streets of some third world nation being sold in New York City. It's that all over again, just in the digital world.
Yep. I mean, going to Yankee games, there was a guy outside the Yankee Stadium when I was a kid. He had a pot, like a little pot and pan with a spoon. His name was Freddie Says. Any old Yankee fans watching this you'll definitely know who I'm talking about. He always stood by the same T-shirt vendor that got kicked out of the area every game because he was selling unlicensed merchandise. But I mean, everybody supported him. He was there every day. He became an icon in the stadium. So much so that some people actually bought him tickets and brought him into the game just because he was always outside. So, look, those types of elements become that community, right? And as you continuously seed elements of that community, the community grows around that. And that's where the support network kind of grows with it.
So there's the magic word there, Mike: community, right? The Web3, if it's anything else, it's community. It's the ability to build things for your community, create community. I think that we're starting to see this evolution grow. The Super Bowl was a very interesting evolution, if you will. You had TikTok influencers, you had companies doing stuff in the metaverse like that. We haven't seen that a few years back. Would have never happened.
How many QR codes did you see?
None.
I saw at least 10.
Yeah, I'm kidding.
I saw at least 10.
No, I know.
Called that out last week, right? I mean,
You did.
I was like, look, I knew for a fact that was something that, because it's cyclical with these types of strategies. We saw that happen a few times, especially with the Super Bowl. But it's funny. It's almost, again, hey, you're late to the party.
Yeah. But they're getting to the party. Like these big companies, like you said, they know there's something there now. Now they just don't know how to do it.
Yep.
So it'll be interesting to see. Which, by the way, Michelle, that reminds me that this episode is sponsored by the Web3 Content Lab, which is strategic consulting to help any business get Web3 ready. Right. So this is what the companies are going to start to think about now. What do we do to get? We know there's people there. There are eyeballs in Decentraland. There's eyeballs. There's communities you can't access unless you have NFTs. That's it. We know, we've done this broadcast on several platforms. Some platforms are better than others in terms of the type of fan base. So it's a matter of how do these companies tap the people they need to be tapping based on what they offer. Be interesting to watch.
Which is a great segue into CoinDesk's newsletter that they
that's
announced.
A great. So the reason that story I wanted to touch this is CoinDesk has a newsletter now around Web3. That's it. Like that's the news is that it's newsworthy enough that there are newsletters on the topic, whereas it was a get rich quick thing a year ago.
I could have sworn they had this. They had this a couple months ago, but they didn't like the name, so they put it on pause, and we actually talked about that.
But now they're calling it airdrop, right? But it's a Web2 solution for about a Web3 topic. Now they're not using Mirror for example, and dropping the newsletter as an NFT every week or every month, because I guess that would cost them money as opposed to emailing people. But because, well, I signed up for it, and it was like I was waiting to put my wallet address in to get my weekly newsletter NFT, but no email address was all that was required. So they're kind of in, but not all in, really.
But to Mike's point, CoinDesk is a Web2 company pretending to be Web3 again.
Well, just because you write about it doesn't mean you're pretending.
No, I don't. But I don't think that I think they are a Web2 company, and they're just talking about Web3.
Right.
I don't think they're pretending to be Web3. They're just saying we're interested or we're knowledgeable. Listen to us.
We're a Web 3x3 podcast on a Web 2 podcast. Using LinkedIn, right? So, we're not one to cast stones in our glass house here, but look, again, it's an integration of what people are used to, because again, that's where the honey jar is right now, right? It's starting to move its way into these other technologies. And I think that over time, some bees are going to flock over, some additional swarms are going to flock, and we're going to start seeing an integration or a merger into this Web3 world. And, link that to AI if you want to. I'm not convinced yet that this whole AI and Web3 conversation needs to be, jointly discussed. I think that they could easily remain separated. But, take your standard e-commerce store, Wix, Shopify, all of these various things. These are website building tools that you need to actually write content for. You need to actually develop visualized tools for. They're integrating these AI technologies within their software development, right? That was another article that we were going to touch on. As a certified Wix developer, I noticed this months ago, and I didn't really know what it was. I didn't understand what power ChatGPT had at the time, but they were very much ahead of the curve about integrating some of those elements in their design software.
I think that there's a clock ticking on that, though, Mike, because companies like Mixo is one of them. There's companies that do website building, AI driven. Tome makes slide decks, AI automated. I can go make a pitch deck for VC with a press of a button. No more dragging and dropping and finding the right pictures. So I agree with you. Wix, Squarespace, they're all going to have to integrate, and I think they will. But there's a window of time. People don't want clunky. And I'm not saying it will be. I'm just saying that when you convert technology A into technology B, at least in my experience, it's always been a bit wonky at times.
Well, I disagree with something like this because I feel like it's extremely customizable, right? So Shopify can now customize different elements for drag and drop that fits their particular model and caters to their drag and drop model that their users are used to, versus, maybe some of these other integrations like Discord might have a whole different approach to how they integrate some of the ChatGPT bots or some of the open AI sourced image generation tool bots into their server. And you want to talk about the real money making element of this, 100 million subscribers, the monthly fees, blah, blah, blah. No, it's the licensing and the customization of the tool to those particular enterprises. That's where the real money maker is going to be.
When you say the customization of the tools, define that.
Amazon drops $100 million, for example, into OpenAI to create a customized OpenAI source that's tailored to that platform.
Right. That makes sense. And on that note, Shopify is using generative AI now for product descriptions, which I think you referenced.
Yeah. And Wix is doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Wix has been doing it for a couple months now, which is exciting. Again, we're talking about this merge, this integration of this new technology. We're not sticking our feet in the cement. We're not static and sticking with what we know works. And, we're Web 2 all the way. Woohoo. No, we are evolving with what is currently evolving out there. And I think that's really cool to see, because that's going to help introduce more people to what technology is out there. We live in our own bubbles, right? So sometimes it takes a little bit of time to get out of that. If I go to my wife and I'm saying, hey, I checked this out on ChatGPT, she'd be like, what the hell is that? Maybe she saw it in an article somewhere. Maybe she understands it to a limited capacity, but I mean, she has no idea. Nobody really understands the true power and potential that this has.
Right.
But if she starts seeing it more and more and more, all of a sudden, hey, you know what? Maybe I should try this out for, I don't know, how do I make a Valentine's Day card for my daughter in her class?
Right. Although that's illegal in the school system here in New York. So
Is
final
it?
thoughts on themes. We've seen the regulatory movement is starting now. At least it looks like it is in the crypto space here in the States. SEC, New York State, they're all getting involved in things like crypto assets, that the things you can do in the crypto world, they now are starting to see some rules suggested. We've also seen the NFL was an interesting new activations around NFTs, Decentraland. We're seeing TikTok influencers. Web3 is starting to creep into traditional sporting events. I mean, that's a very traditional. And of course, the one I always like as well, the Web3 versus DeFi. That's an interesting. There's a bleed, if you will, between concepts, including the AI creator economy Web3 thing. It's not. They are very different. These are all very different dynamics. But folks are starting to say, okay, it's all the same. But that's the beginnings, in my opinion, of recognition and understanding. Thoughts, Michelle? We'll start with you.
I was going to say in the case of the SEC and all of that stuff, I think that they are testing out the lounge chairs next to the pool to see which one they like the best. But they, the sun's only in a certain spot certain times of the day. So I think they move around the pool, and they'll keep moving around the pool as the sun moves over to different sides. I think that that's what's going to happen. So there's a lot of jostling for the right seat, and everyone wants to have a seat when the music stops, don't they? So I think that's a long game, and we're going to be talking about that for a lot more episodes. In regards to the other things, I think that what we saw with the Decentraland, the stuff from the Super Bowl compared to last year, this year, all of that stuff, I mean, I just think that it really shows us that there's exciting elements that and ideas to come, and really I think the uses of what Web3 will do in this space is just limited by the imagination of the people who are coming up with the ideas. And at the moment, I can't see that. At the moment, I think it's a never ending. And every day I read something or something comes up where I think, oh wow, didn't think of that, but it makes sense. And I think that that's going to happen more and more as we go on.
Mike, what are your final thoughts on the themes we've seen tonight?
So the first one, and it's kind of interesting. I don't know if we glossed over it or if it's just, I guess the way that it kind of evolved since the article was written. I think the article was really focused on how this regulation has driven the economy back down. But as of now, it's right back where it was, I guess, when they were talking about it's back on the rise and all that stuff. So I think that these regulatory pushes, these fines, like we discussed earlier, and these hey, I'm here flexing my muscles, pay me what I'm owed, and I'll just go away for a little bit. That could actually be kind of a little sneaky way to help control the market, right? Because when they do enforce that, maybe the market dips a little bit. And when I say market, I really refer to Bitcoin and Ethereum, because a lot of things kind of follow that path. It's not completely separated yet as far as all these coins are. As far as the Super Bowl goes, I mean, there's your honeypot of the week, right, for advertising. And here's my question, and it's a rhetorical one, but I know we touched on it last week. Are more people talking about Doritos and Decentraland or State Farm's TikTok video?
That's an interesting one. I'm going to say probably State Farm. What do you think?
I haven't heard anything on State Farm.
Honestly, that's a good question, Mike. I don't know the answer to it. I think that people know. There was a news article that traditional television has fallen behind over the top, like set-top boxes now, in terms of viewership. People know that there's eyeballs are going the non-traditional route. They know that. The difference is when social media showed up in Web 2, they were still universal platforms. We all get on Twitter. We all get on Facebook. But in Web 3, it's very community specific. I buy a specific NFT because I want to be part of the unfan community. I buy a specific NFT because I want to be part of the Tilt community. These are not universals. These are specific to individual characteristics, we'll say. Community.
I agree. One encourages engagement in the form of, I'm going to show up to Decentraland Triangle and I'm going to play games in an effort to earn rewards. And one is just another iteration of these social platforms in the form of TikTok, right? So who as a brand is going to have a better long-term engagement memory factor, which is essentially the goal of marketing anyway, right? I would argue that Doritos did a hell of a job, much better. And I'm sure that their content is a little bit more evergreen from that capacity than whatever TikTok decided to, whatever State Farm decided to spend on TikTok versus what they could have spent on the Super Bowl.
I actually need to dig up the TikTok and see what it is. Keep going, Michelle.
I was going to say, I don't know have we got any data yet on how many people were walking through Decentraland looking for Doritos when after the ad was on?
Not yet. I have not seen any data on that.
I haven't seen data on that. I haven't seen data on the claim for the digital collectible either. Like, it wasn't like last year where it was just kind of out of left field and people were like, wait a minute, TiVo that or DVR that back. I didn't get a chance to scan that. So maybe some of that FOMO and that hype was kind of lost. But look, just to kind of wrap up the whole segment on the NFL, as we start seeing more of these major brands dip their toes into Web3, those types of claims via that source of commercial are going to be a little bit more relevant, right? Instead of, hey, sign up here, give me your email address and join my newsletter, it's going to be like, hey, scan here and get my NFT exclusive because you watched this ad on the Super Bowl. And talk about KPIs, man. Talk about the ability to understand your return on that advertising investment. I mean, this is going to drive the cost of those advertising platforms through the roof. Super Bowl ads are going to be worth way more now.
Yeah. So on that note, this is a quick reminder that this is a business discussion for informational purposes only. None of this constitutes investment advice in any way, shape, or form. This is going to be here every week, guys. Web 3x3 is the podcast. We are at 4:00 Eastern time on LinkedIn, soon to be Twitter. We should talk offline, folks, about audio spaces there for LinkedIn. And so I'm going to say thank you for those who joined us, for those who are watching this later on. We appreciate it. We're here every week. We always welcome any types of questions, feedback. I want to thank my co-hosts, Michelle, Mike, bringing the conversation to a very interesting place as always. And I'm going to close.
Sorry about my internet.
That's all right. We're closing this week with a quote from Tony Robbins. The only thing keeping you from getting what you want is the story you tell yourself. Peace out, everybody. Have a good week.
Bye.